for joining us today for our first webinar of the series. My name is Marcella Poloski, and I'm the Business Development Representative here at ERP-One. Before we get into it, I wanted to provide you with background on ERP-One and who we are. ERP-One is an ERP solutions provider. We provide consulting for JDE in technical, application, development, and project management. We also provide long-term support via staff augmentation or managed services. Our team has over 20 years of experience working with clients as an extension of their own team, and we pride ourselves on our client-centric approach. Our goal is to help customers get the most value out of their ERP investment. Today's presentation, Safeguard Your JDE Data with Expert Protection Strategies, is presented by Nick Wilson. Nick is ERP-One's Innovation and Technology Lead and has been with ERP-One for over 15 years. He specializes in project management, digital transformation, architecture design and review, and upgrade planning and execution. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please drop them in the comment box and we will make sure to address them at the end of the presentation. And if by any chance you miss some important points, please note this webinar is being recorded. I will now pass it on to Nick for the presentation. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Marcella, and thank you everyone for joining today. As she mentioned, this is the first of a three-part presentation where we discuss some of the new features of JD Edwards in Release 24. For this one today, we're going to look at how we can utilize data protection and how it is implemented along with Oracle's bank account masking solution. The agenda for today is as follows, which we'll try to complete in 25 minutes, and then we'll save some time for questions. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a definition of the solution itself, what's included, and where it fits into the overall security structure of JD Edwards. And then I mentioned those features. How do they build upon each other, where we can then see them in a simulated demo. I'll then finish with a summary, and then we'll take some questions. So the objective of today's presentation and of data masking itself is to prevent highly sensitive data to be shown to the wrong people. That is the essential purpose of data masking. But the solution, as JD Edwards or Oracle has delivered it, is a little bit more complicated. It comprises of more features. And really, securing your data makes sense, but data protection versus data masking, what is it exactly? Looking at the benefits of data masking, which is masking the data from the user on the screen in terms of starring it out. Implementing it, again, secures your data and reduces risk by protecting that data itself. And maybe most importantly, putting you in compliance. From the end user perspective, that data masking will allow them to view and update access, which overall will make their lives slightly easier if it was encumbered before, reducing human error and increasing productivity. So that's the data masking portion, but it also involves data protection. And that is part of the solution. That is the configuration, how do we configure what users see what data, or which users can see the masking and which can't, and in which applications. So to make this impact here, or at least to visually show where it is impacted from the security side, there's two components really. Data protection, data masking that I mentioned, we're going to dive into that, and then the security workbench. And so really those are the 12 security features inside of E1 and the ones that we're going to be focusing on. And just to put that into context, we are, when trying to display or show the total amount of features, there are many, and this is where they look like in context of it all. And so that was inside of JD Edwards. There are some security considerations outside of JD Edwards. when masking your data and securing it from view access, that is really good, and this is where this feature resides. But that does not mean that your data is masked inside the database. And so protecting that data from unauthorized users gaining access through direct queries and things like that is still a risk and an area that this does not cover. Similarly, the file system where integrations are stored and have access to. When we're writing these integrations, if there's bank account data, it will likely need to be unmasked in these areas and some security implemented around those. And finally, if there are some check printing options, although JD Edwards has made some considerations for this, we need to know or understand that the data, if it's masked and printed inside of JD Edwards, it's going to be masked when you print it externally. So that's one portion. But also, where those unmasked, if we want them to be unmasked, where that output is stored. Is it secured or is it unsecured? And again, some considerations. So getting back to JD Edwards, in terms of masking, how can we achieve that? And we can do that by three features mainly. The first one is a data dictionary feature where you're allowed to mask an alias that's a component inside of JD Edwards. And then the latest release 24 contains the data protection configuration. That's a feature, an application, and a table that stores the configuration and then some new business functions. So if a customer wanted to today mask their data, they would be able to do that by implementing these features. And so we'll dive into them now a little bit in terms of turning on data masking using the data dictionary rule, as I mentioned, in tools 898, apps 9.0, so not recently. You were able to create a rule, a display rule that allowed you to mask from the screen. And so when you did this on the alias, whenever users would open up the screen, it would just show stars. The data dictionary is a global setting. And so when you implement that solution, you wanted to test or have a different setup, you would need to create a non-prod and a prod data dictionary. And then if we wanted to utilize any custom aliases, you need to create a custom alias and implement that as well. And so because of that, it was a little bit more cumbersome. If you wanted to not dynamically, but segregate which users wanted to be masked or unmasked, there was a few different ways, but all were cumbersome. So what you could do, and again, as the solution could be implemented, was to create your own by having a display rule as an override. And so having an alias, cloned, duplicated alias data dictionary value, where one could be masked and one could be unmasked. And then the usage of those would have to be controlled. And again, there was some issues with maintaining these customizations. It was very difficult to do. You also had to secure this with version security. We had to make separate versions with this override, and it did not follow any sort of standards more than the what was in place at the time then. And that brings us to today. So two main releases from 898 jumping up to release 24, which is a feature that they released called data protection. This is a centralized repository, a table inside of JDE, where you can configuration of who can see the data and who cannot is stored. Oracle has also delivered a business function, a data protection rule, that will look or query this table and compare the security for the user and then display whether they should see it or not dynamically. And so these two features released in 24 combined allow you to do the data masking customizations yourself. And it is exactly what Oracle has done or has delivered with this release as well. And so what they've delivered is a masking solution for bank accounts using the scenario, the methodology that I just outlined, with dynamically enabling and disabling the form for unmasking and masking, and delivering it as part of the Release 24 set of features. So that's really amazing. Customers are now secured by default. Masking of the data is a priority for a lot of customers, and this solution is delivered purposely with it totally locked down. And so for a lot of different reasons, but the main one being that, installing it and implementing it turned on by default is safer than not. Customers are now forced to, or at least needing to, do the investigation as well as implementing the configuration as part of their rollout of Release 24. And of course, whether you wanted to implement masking or unmasking or not, there is some implications here. The main ones are around the users themselves actually requiring access to run separate integrations, processes, and other components. And so implementing Release 24 and not testing some of those features or running into it unexpectedly causes a lot of problems for specific continuous delivery rollout projects. So looking at the scope, where do we look for fixing the problem here? And it's not too difficult, especially for those of us who understand some of the modules and what's being used in the system. And really, there's four main modular areas that will be affected here: financials, payroll, localizations, and order management. And put a little bit more in a summarized way, any part of the system that has or uses or stores a bank account number. And so these areas, if you've implemented them or using data in any of these areas, when you go to Release 24, all users will not be able to see this account data, which for 99% of the user base is completely fine. But there are some critical services and processes that need to be configured and set up prior to going live here. And so the main process to do that is configuring exceptions, figuring out who needs to see access, what applications, what aliases or forms on the screen need to see that bank account data, and we need to find out where all those components are spread throughout the system there. And so really, again, it's identifying those data items, using the cross-reference, your internal documentation, especially for custom processes and custom objects, where they're used is going to be important to look at. If you're implementing and utilizing a completely standard system delivered by Oracle, these are the data items themselves that are affected. And so this is the first part of what we were referring to there. At customer sites, what we've needed to do is take this list and then add on custom aliases where they've been implemented, or some of these that have been cloned. And so that portion needs to be not transparent, but we need to know where those cloned customizations, custom data dictionaries are located. Again, the cross-reference is the #1 place to get that information, and running it off of the latest extract. Excuse me. So after the aliases have been identified, we need to look at the applications and the UBEs where they're used. Again, with the cross-reference, you can come up with that information. These ones here are the delivered applications where Oracle has updated the code to implement the dynamically controlled masking and unmasking. And so that brings us to how do we control and add this from a configuration standpoint. So we know the scope, the aliases, the applications, where they're used, and we need to, all of these components need to be put somewhere. And so there's a UDC 00PI where these objects are located, the standard ones, but we also need to include custom objects. Any of those cloned ones to the bank account definitely need to be put in there if you want them to operate in the same way, as well as future solutions that you may want to implement. All of those need to be added into here and the programs that are utilized. And so we can see here, these ones are able to be added, and it's just a normal UDC value there. And then finally, once that is all set up and ready to go, we can add or set up our exceptions in the latest program and table that has been released as part of the latest feature tool set. So without ado, again, more simulated demo here. When we're creating or configuring these exceptions in the system, we do that by opening the application, obviously, which is P0040. It's located on some of the system admin menus, but can be relocated to the appropriate place and role. When we go and add a record, you're really faced with two configuration options here. So these are called the record type. Record type 1, which is a generic and akin to a star public type of record, where you can apply this security, masking or unmasking, across all users and only by program. So this is useful if you want to attack, if you have a problem with a hammer, in that you have some users or all users are seeing it or not seeing it, and you want to reverse it, you can do that by program here using record type 1. Record type 2, which is a slightly more nuanced, it allows you to also select a role or user as well. So we would suggest using just roles if you can. That would allow, or omitting user-based security type of records, but you can do both depending on your security structure. The unique part here with this, or not unique actually, but the good part of benefit of this solution, like most with JD Edwards, is that it does allow you to configure it the way you want to. So if your security structure, I mentioned earlier, there's two components to this. The security workbench is one of them. If that workbench has an all doors open, all doors closed, or some hybrid approach, this configuration can fit within that easily. And so when we do the program and user setup here, we can see it's displayed on both sides. And again, I mentioned those are the options that we can have. And then the final one, which is really the main lever here, turning it on or off, or the record itself, is this view or update flag. So if there are no records in here, we'll see an example shortly, the end user will not be able to, or sorry, the end user will not be able to see unmasked data. So again, if there's no records in this table, users will not see the data. They'll be masked. When we add a record in, regardless of the type, view, or update, the user will see the record. And if it's type view, it will be view only. And if it's update, they will be able to change the record. And so this component, this feature functionality, is also useful for a few different reasons as well. Mainly allowing a security administrator or a masking or unmasking administrator to be segregated from a system administrator and their responsibilities in protecting or managing who sees the data and who doesn't is a little bit easier now. And so again, as I mentioned, when there's no records configured, the end user will see the masked data like is on the screen now. So you can, this is the bank account by address in the my favorite P01012 application. And the bank account number has all stars except for the last four so that you could delineate which it is. And again, that looks like this component here where you can see a configuration record of view. You can then see or update here, I apologize. You can send view or update. You're able to then see the data like this. Again, with view security, you can see, oh, I apologize here. Let me go back. So when you have no records configured, the data is masked. When you have view security enabled, you can see the bank account information itself. When you have update configured, you can see and update the data on the screen. And that gives you sort of the three different options that are set up. And so security administrators, again, are taken out of the mix, but system administrators are taken out of the process, and security administrators can be implemented instead. And so the reason where that happens is masking the data with another method is possible. Within column security in JD Edwards on the security workbench, you are able to restrict users from seeing this alias on the field itself. And so when we were implementing this and have run into this at customers, there have been scenarios where the customer has column security set up and has implemented data protection with some mixed results. And it's an area that we need to focus in on. And so when we do implement this, regardless of the record that's in the system in data protection, whether it's view or update, the security workbench will always win. The column security, if it's implemented of a view type, meaning that end users can see it but not update it, will always overwrite any update record from data protection. And so when implementing this solution, something like this may cause some confusion because the end result is not expected. Looking at a total restriction, meaning if we totally shut down any access to that field from the security workbench, regardless of whether there's view or update security, the end user will never see the field and they won't even see the description on the screen itself as well. And so with that, really, we have the summary and a couple takeaways here. If we're doing an R24 or higher upgrade, data protection needs to be configured for bank accounts at minimum because it is disabled or restrictive by default. Implementing or running, getting an impact assessment report, which will outline the net change in scope is the driving and also acts as the driving and planning all aspects of your upgrade project, is a priority on all of our continuous delivery approaches and projects. You may also have recently done an upgrade or wondering why your bank accounts aren't working properly or things aren't working as they're designed. We need to look at the security workbench, its configuration, understand whether there's an all doors closed or open, and column security that is allowing or restricting, changing the results that you're expecting. Finally, you're able to see and understand how to implement a custom solution, whether it's another alias, not bank accounts, but something different that you want to restrict access to. You can use these approaches and methodologies to implement that masking for yourself. And again, is an approach that we are doing for customers today. And so with that, I'll hand it back over to Marcella to wrap it up and provide a forum for questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Nick. So In the chat, we had Aaron ask, my understanding was LMask was created for payroll masking. I have had an Oracle engineer advise the P0040 is only to be applied against bank account information, but the SSN field has LMask applied by default. Essentially, setting up SSN in the P0040, I'm told would not work. Can you comment on this?
So as well, yes, there are some hard-coded components in the system that you can get tripped up on or that won't work in this way. Most of that is really due to masking some of the standard aliases and where they're utilized. But certainly from the custom perspective, they can be implemented in that in those data protection tables there. Certainly, though, if you want to learn more afterwards, we can discuss and chat about some of the other potential gotchas when implementing it. And again, I would suggest, yeah, we could discuss as well, and we could put some more questions to go along with this webinar.
Amazing. The next question is, do I need to upgrade to R24 to get this feature?
Yes, that's a great question. So data protection, the table, as well as all of the uplifted objects with the bank accounts are all part of release 24. The LMask or the masking feature that has been delivered from Oracle has been released since 8.9.8. And so likely that is available to you, but the other ones have been just released just this past November. With that, I will also comment and say that it is because it is new and these business functions are all completely new, that there may be some additional style of gotchas similar to what the other question was referring to as well. But certainly I do know that Oracle is wanting to utilize this moving forward in the future.
Awesome. Looks like there's one more question. What is the best way to not use data masking because we believe that our security is great?
Certainly, and so as I mentioned, there is another there is the way that you can configure security masking to fit within your own security structure can be done using the two record types. One that is system-wide and restrictive, or that allows you to see the data, and then the other that's a little bit more prescribed, where you can put a user role or object as well. And so it can fit in either approach and allows this to be implemented regardless of your solution. And so if it is all working as it is in place, you're able to uncheck or fit it in terms of disabling it or enabling it altogether to work with your needs. Hopefully that answered your question.
It doesn't look like any other questions are coming in through the chat at the moment. And we are pretty much right on time, so we can wrap it up. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I will be sending out an email to all attendees with a recording of this webinar. And in the meantime, please check us out on LinkedIn. We share a lot of blog posts and helpful tips, and keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars. Thank you again.